Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Brought to you by Junk Be Gone and the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source. Glad you could join us today on this Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to, well, as the Sinatra thing used to go, Happy Mother's Day to all you mothers out there. Happy Mother's Day to my mother who's watching and to all of those moms who are watching today. We thank them for having us here. We also want to thank you for joining to talk a lot of football, because this next 90 minutes, it's going to be tons of Tennessee football talk. Rule changes, transfers in and out, recruiting updates, you got it. Let's just get underway. Let's just get this thing started. First segment brought to you by the Garza Law Firm. Local, local, local. That is our mantra on this show. When you can go local, go local. And that also applies to attorneys. You want a local attorney who knows the ins and outs of the local court systems, the people involved. Marcos Garza is the local attorney to call when you need legal representation in East Tennessee. He's been a part of this community for years and years and years. Call a neighbor. Call Marcos Garza and the Garza Law Firm. All right. Let's welcome in the first wave of panelists we have today. From WNML AM and FM, we have Josh Ward. Josh, thanks for being here.
Thanks, John.
Ryan Callahan back with us from GoVols247.com, so you know we'll be talking plenty of recruiting today. Ryan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And back from theathletic.com down there, David Ubben. David, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it.
All right, let's go ahead and show you there are 4 transfers that Tennessee has added to the program since spring practice ended. You knew about Joe Milton. We talked about him last week. Caleb Tremblay, we talked about him last week. Javonte Mitchell, we laid it out there that this would be a good get for the Vols if they could get him, especially position of need. Good player, proven background. And then a bit of a surprise, wide receiver Javonte Payton from Mississippi State also announced he was coming to Tennessee this week. So that is 4, and I want to start this first segment by saying, in terms of a fan's perspective, which of those 4 do you guys anticipate them seeing the most of? Who's going to have the most impact on this year's team? You can base that on the position of need. You can base that on how much playing time you think they're going to get, how good they are, whichever way you want to take it. Who's going to be the most impactful of the 4 guys on that list?
I'm going to take Milton. I think you're going to see all 4 of those guys. All 4 of those guys are going to contribute. If they weren't going to, they wouldn't have brought him in. But I think Milton, this offense is not super complicated to learn. And I think Milton, you look at the tools, you look at what he can do. I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say I think he could be the most talented quarterback on the roster immediately. He's got to prove it. He's got to win that in preseason camp. But you watch some of what he's been able to do, that arm strength, mobility, good pocket presence. Got to improve the accuracy a little bit, obviously. But I think he's still a guy that I feel pretty good about as being a guy that has a great shot to start some games next year.
Why didn't it work for him at Michigan? That's he 2 years he sat on the bench. Mm-hmm. Then he wins the job, loses the job by year's end. Everyone's talking about he's got the legs, he's got the arm, he's got the build. Cam Newton comparisons I've heard in terms of look. But it didn't look that way at Michigan.
He didn't get it done. Yeah, he didn't get it done. And I think a lot of that is, quite frankly, the offense. I think different quarterbacks fit better in different offenses. I think this offense is a much better fit for him. He wants to cut it loose. I mean, people are really going to be wowed by his arm strength, literally. Like, when he lets it out, I mean, he's got the strongest arm, I think, immediately on the roster. And that is going to matter. But I think ultimately it's just about fit. And that offense, find me a quarterback who has looked good in that offense, and find me a quarterback who's looked good in this offense. It's a pretty long list. And I think that's just what it is.
All right. I would have not gone with Milton. I would have gone in another direction. But being the quarterback, it's the most important position on the field. So if Milton does win the job and play a lot, I can see why he would move to the top of the list. Where are you guys going? Would you guys go Milton?
Well, Milton's the bold pick, but I'm not very bold. So I'll just go. I'll go Javonte Mitchell because of the need. So I'll fill that gap with the linebacker help that Tennessee's looking for. Mitchell has the experience and production from Texas, so I just think he's a safe bet to start. So I'll go with Joe Milton coming in from Texas to help fill the loss of so many players at linebacker.
Yeah, Javonte Mitchell, leading tackler at Texas, had 99, as we showed you last week, 99 tackles for his career. You have such a vacant hole there that you needed to plug it with someone, and the fact that you were able to get someone who was a productive player at a Power 5 conference school, that's a positive in my view. I would go Mitchell as well. Who are you going with?
I think there are two answers to it, so I'm going to kind of have a cop-out here. Number of snaps played, I think it's Javonte Mitchell. I think he's the guy who's the most likely to start all 12 games and just be in there from day one and play every down essentially, or a lot of downs. I think the one who makes the biggest impact on the win-loss record might be Joe Milton, like David's saying. I think he's the guy. I don't know that he's the day one starter. I don't know if he gets the job that he keeps it all 12 games, but I think he's the one that has A, the most upside, and B, gives this offense and team the most potential variance in the record. So I think he could elevate this offense. He could cause it to tank if he's no better than he was at Michigan last year, but he may get a chance to play. I would bet on him starting at some point.
All right, so we're all going. I'm guessing your second pick would have been Javonte Mitchell.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're all going Milton or Mitchell there. That leaves Caleb Tremblay, who, no offense to Caleb Tremblay, we don't know what he's going to do here, but at USC he was just a guy. And it looks like a body that you're adding into your defensive line rotation here at Tennessee.
I will say the people I've spoken with think he is maybe a day one starter for Tennessee, and that surprised me a little bit to hear that because of the part-time role he played at USC. I think they feel like they know what they're getting, maybe sort of a bigger defensive end who slides inside to defensive tackle on passing downs, but there's a need there. I mean, Josh Heupel said it twice in his post-spring game comments. They're thin at that position. I don't think they feel nearly as good about the defensive line as most fans do, so I think he'll play a lot.
That's a remarkable point because when you look at it, when Heupel walked in, most people looked at it and said, well, you've at least got bodies at the defensive line position. Must not be very impressive bodies in terms of what they're looking for.
Yeah, not exactly an endorsement of those bodies if you're willing to bring in a guy like Caleb Tremblay who, like you said, hasn't done a ton at USC. No. Maybe he will here, but I don't think when he went in the portal, fans were marching on the facility, but like, we got to get this guy.
Right.
That's not what was happening. So.
Right, former four-star when he was a recruit.
And I'll say this, they may not be done on the defensive line. That's the amazing thing. They might still be looking for more help there, which I think tells you how badly they feel they need some additional bodies.
Yeah, Tennessee staff has made it clear what they thought about some of the defensive linemen coming back.
Well, and you still have questions about Darrell Middleton. Will he even be playing this fall? And,
right.
Javonte Payton, wide receiver, kind of a surprise to many people, coming in from Mississippi State, grad transfer. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to worry about the SEC giving him a thumbs up or thumbs down to transfer, something we'll talk about later in the show. Payton, I mean, that's another area where most people would look at that and say, you've got bodies at receiver. Aren't there places, couldn't you find 3 more linebackers just to throw into that vacant hole? But your thoughts on Payton and what he'll be adding to this team, how much playing time do we expect to see from him? Thoughts?
I'd say he's another guy that I wouldn't be surprised if he starts. If you followed recruiting, first of all, you remember Tennessee's been involved with him out of high school, out of junior college, and now finally gets him out of Mississippi State. So not an unfamiliar name. He's a guy that 3 staffs now have liked. He's talented. He has good speed. He insisted to me this week he runs a sub 4.4. So he gives you some speed on the outside. Had a 100-yard game against LSU last year, and then some injuries kind of derailed his season. But I think they feel he gives them another outside option. I think in an offense like this that runs a lot of 4 and 5 wide, Bayless Jones, Jalen Hyatt, both of those guys may be slot receivers more often, so he lines up on the perimeter more, and he's just experienced, and you're counting on a lot of guys to do it for the first time, like Jimmy Callaway. This gives you a little more certainty at that position, I think.
Yeah, that experience and speed combo, I think, makes a lot of sense. Even if you feel like you got bodies there, this is one that you feel like maybe you can lean on a little bit more.
It's still damning in a way on the bodies that you've had over there. These guys have seen you go through spring practice now, and they're like, okay, we need to pick some starters out of the transfer portal, not just players, people who could start. And there's fuzz flying around our set for some reason. You don't see it, but I don't guess, but it's in our faces. I just think it's not a great statement about the receivers you've had, not a great statement about the defensive line that you've got, if you're still sitting there saying, well, he just landed yesterday and he's going to start. Same with the quarterbacks. That's not a great statement about what Jeremy Pruitt left you.
Yeah, I think it's a reminder that often when we start to talk about, especially in a transition like at Tennessee right now, we can more easily do a roll call as opposed to impact. And often it can be potential, like we're talking about at receiver, but we're talking about a bunch of second-year guys. Hyatt, who has played some, Callaway, Holiday, Weidman potentially. But again, potential. So Javonte Payton's played in the SEC. Yep. He's a guy that's going to come in. The coaching staff feels like they know what they have versus guys that they're trying to guess. So we have to be careful about roll calling the roster as opposed to talking about what impact they will actually make.
And I think too, the transfer portal is going to tell you a lot about staff's evaluation of where they're at. Like JUCO's staffs are kind of all over the place. How many they take, how effective they are. Transfer portal, if all 5 of these guys end up being contributors, that says a lot about the staff's evaluation. I think it's going to be true across the country as the transfer portal becomes more of a thing. You have one-time transfers. How many of these guys are you taking that don't do anything, and how many of the guys are you take that end up being key members of your team?
All right, when we come back, let's talk about a key member of the team who's leaving. I think everyone knew Henry To'oTo'o was going to leave. Been in the portal for months. He's made his decision. He's going to Alabama. What do we expect from him there? A little later, we're going to get into the SEC and their views on internal transfers. We're going to get into the bodies that were left behind for this team and the amount of attrition that Tennessee's gone through. Has any school out there ever dealt with as much attrition as Tennessee has this offseason? You might be surprised by that answer. But we got a lot coming up, including Henry To'oTo'o next. Come on back on the Sports Source.